This is the program we started, gosh, way back at the beginning of the pandemic. We've continued it on a monthly basis. We love to get together with artists and kind of find out about that magic thing that inspires creatives to do what they do. This afternoon, you're going to meet jazz musician, arranger, composer, music educator. I'm sure I've left out a few accolades. Mr. Jon Hatamiya. He'll be making his debut at the Sutter Theater Center for the Arts on July 30th. Welcome, Jon.
Thanks. It's thank you for having me. It's great to chat a little bit.
Finally, yeah, we've been
Yeah.
waiting for this moment, your concert, since you were scheduled just before the pandemic set in. So, speaking of the pandemic, so talk about your life, during the pandemic, and now that we're kind of past it, but are we really? I mean, what'd you do when all of this set in, as far as teaching and performing?
It was pretty challenging to say the least. I make my living as a freelancer, and I do have a couple regular teaching gigs, but I those are only more recent. And at least for the few years before COVID shutdowns hit, pretty much all of my work was just gigging when I get called to play with people. And I was doing pretty well with that around LA for a while. And then as soon as COVID shutdowns hit, basically within the span of, gosh, like a week
Mm.
in March, my entire calendar for 2020 and like pretty much 2021 as well, a good chunk of it got canceled, like completely wiped out. I
Wow.
had a couple tours in the book that I was supposed to be traveling with some bands, and had a number of shows of my own, and every single thing got canceled. So it was pretty challenging. I'd been based in LA, and when all that hit, uh, basically had to figure something else out and kind of scramble to figure out how to continue to make a living through all that,
Wow.
especially as we didn't know how long all the shutdowns were going to be.
Yeah. No, it was absolutely maddening. And talking to other performers and teachers and just us in the kind of arts support business with theaters and art galleries, and all those were shut down. And dealing with the political climate up here, we had COVID policies when we started to reopen, and that wasn't welcomed by some segments in the community. And so we all had our challenges to deal with in the creative sector. So, well, I'm glad we're on this side of it, but
Hmm.
we're watching cautiously. But I think a lot of venues are still imposing some level of COVID precautions. We were back in Washington D.C. last week and saw a performance at the Kennedy Center, and they still required masks. And they didn't ask for proof of vaccination or a negative test result, but we certainly saw that all over Northern California at the height of the pandemic. So, but losing all those gigs, I know, is a heartbreaker because I think you were scheduled for sometime in May after the March shutdown, and of course we had to
Hmm.
cancel our little thing here. So you're kind of welcome home concert. Where'd you grow up? Did you grow up in Davis? Or
Yes.
yeah, that's
Um,
what I thought. Yeah.
so my family has roots in Marysville, going back to my grandparents on my dad's side. My dad grew up there, and I was born up in that area. Um, but as a toddler, basically my family moved to Washington D.C. for some work that my parents had.
Oh, you were.
Um,
Oh, I didn't realize you lived in D.C. as well.
yeah, just for a few years,
Yeah.
and then we moved back to California when I was 7,
Okay.
and settled in Davis, and my dad is still there, and so I grew
Yeah.
up there pretty much, yeah, from second grade all the way through. So I consider myself a Davis native for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, fantastic. Yeah, I lived in Washington, D.C. for 20 years and then came back to California, my home state, about 13 years ago and settled up here. And yeah, I had I know Roy and Miriam Hatamiya, and
Hmm.
I forget the family connection. I worked with them as part of the Japanese American Citizens League on a
Yeah, that's my
project.
great aunt and uncle,
Yes.
my grandpa's brother.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lovely people. And I've met your dad over the years and worked with him on a few projects. And yeah, well, great to know you, and looking forward to actually meeting you in person. Um, so I talk about this section as kind of your origin story. So, all right, Davis native, more or less. When did you decide to pursue music as a career?
Honestly, pretty early on.
Yeah.
I started on cello in
Oh,
like the Davis schools in fourth grade. And in fifth grade, they started offering band instruments, and I pretty much immediately switched and decided on trombone, mostly because my dad and my grandpa both had played trombone when they were in high school,
oh,
and
wow. I had no idea. Yeah.
they encouraged me to check it out. Um, and I can't say that I was great at it immediately, but I really enjoyed it, and was very enthusiastic about playing the trombone, even just early on. So I think by the time I got to middle school, I started taking private lessons with a great uh, trombone teacher in the Sacramento area, Joel Elias. And he kind of told my parents that I had a lot of potential. This
Hmm.
was all mostly classical oriented stuff.
I was
And
going to ask because I think I mentioned in my notes that I looked up I'd forgotten about the huge classical repertoire for trombone. It's like vast. I mean, everybody from John Cage to, whatever, even in the new classical genre. Yeah. So they saw potential early on, huh?
yeah, and up to that point, I had no reference point, and my parents didn't really either. It was just like it was something I liked to do, um, and it was a lot of fun. And I played baseball growing up, played basketball. My family, sorry, my family is a big baseball family. My dad
Yeah.
played in
Who's your home team? Oh, wait, let me look. Looks like San Francisco.
right there, yeah. Um, my dad played in college, and then my brother ended up playing in college as well. So my family really was mostly a baseball family, but
Ah,
music was just always something that I really enjoyed. And once I started studying with Joel, he kind of told my folks like, hey, if he wants to pursue it, he really could do it. Um, and that was something that I started to pick up on, especially as I got older. Um, and I think pretty much by the time I hit high school, I mean, I really hadn't been playing much jazz at all. Initially, at least, I thought, yeah, I want to pursue a career as an orchestral player. And it didn't end up that way, but
yeah, yeah.
I really started really focusing on at least, focusing on the trombone and trying to figure out what the next steps were in order to at least try to make a career as a musician pretty early on in high school. Yeah.
Wow. What was your first paid gig as a musician?
I don't remember.
Was it fairly
Gosh.
early on? And the reason I'm asked is we're working with educators and administrators, and the buzz is always around career technical education or
Right.
STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. And always saying, what about STEAM? What about CAE, career arts education? And
Totally.
I mean, right? You're a great example of someone who chose fairly early on the arts as a career path. Um,
And to be honest, I had no idea what that was going to look like,
yeah,
and no one around me really did either. I mean, my only reference point really was my teachers, and I at least saw that they could make a living teaching music. Um,
sure.
but I was hopeful that I could, at least try to make a living as a performer. And honestly, I can't really remember my first paid gig. It was at some point when I was in high school.
Okay,
Um,
well, that's yeah, to my point.
and I probably didn't get paid as much as I should have in
Yeah,
hindsight, but it was a valuable experience because at that point I was playing with other people who were actually professionals,
oh wow.
and I didn't really gig a lot though when I was in high school. It was just like a one time thing. Someone called me, a local person, and most of my experience in high school was honestly just playing at school, playing with my friends, and then
Yeah,
playing in some other groups around the area. I tried to find, and my mom especially helped me find a lot of other opportunities to play outside of the school band. So there were programs at SF Jazz and
Oh,
at the jazz school in Berkeley. My junior and senior year, I ended up driving down to the Bay Area once or twice a week after school
wow.
to go play in some of these groups.
Oh, amazing.
Um,
So
and
you really had
that
the family support. It sounds like from the
for sure,
beginning. Yeah,
definitely, and I feel very grateful
yeah,
about that. I mean, even though again, none of us really had any idea what any of it looked like, uh,
sure.
and I'm just grateful that it was an option that was left open to me because it is a pretty excuse me, it's a pretty unpredictable career path, and even people who I've found, at least, that people who I look up to, who I view as successful, it's still, for most of them, they are all grinding and just trying to
Yeah,
make constantly make things happen.
kind of
Um,
gig to gig. Yeah.
so
Well, it's interesting. Back on the arts as a career path, we recently hosted a trio, a bluegrass trio, Broken Compass out of Chico, and it's initially it's quartet. They've added a bass
mhm.
player, so it's three guys and a young woman playing violin and or fiddle and doing a lot of vocals, and hearing their path. I mean, they've been doing it forever as well, and they're making money like every week. It was phenomenal playing, fairs and all that stuff. And while they're going to, Chico State, in fact, two of them I think are still in high school, and they were
Wow.
phenomenal, in a whole different genre. But I don't know if it's easier to sell jazz versus, bluegrass. I guess it depends on the market. But it was just tickled. I was tickled to meet them and interview them before the concert and learn more about their process. And I said to them, just like to you, how did you get into bluegrass? Where does that come? Well, they've all done rock and other things, like you said. You did some classical, and yeah, crazy. So you took a liking to the trombone after you kind of left the cello, huh?
Mhm. Yeah.
Who and so and I remember growing up. As I said, I was around some great jazz musicians. One guy had played with the Stan Kenton band, and we used to go to big band night out of Disneyland, and it was really pretty cool. And some of the names I remembered, like J.J. Johnson, I think he was one of the early ones. Jack Teagarden. Who did you connect with in the jazz realm early on that
So
inspired you?
what kind of led me into jazz was this teacher that I had, Joel. He still teaches at Sac State, and he's
Oh
taught
wow,
at Sac State for a long time. And at that point, um, this was after my eighth grade year. Sac State was doing a summer jazz camp, and it was mostly big band oriented, which is kind of
okay.
rare these days. But they had a
Is
lot
it? I'm sorry to hear that because I'm a huge big band fan. Yeah.
it's rare, at least for a camp, to be focused on something like that, just because I don't know, I run my own big band, and I play in a lot of other big bands that my friends run, but it's not something that's really like, it's not as big a part of the scene as it used to be.
Okay.
But this camp had a lot of alums of the Kenton band, and it was run by this bass player, Jim Widener, and he had partnered with Sac State to do this camp every summer, and they just needed some extra trombone players. And at that
Wow.
point, I hadn't played any jazz, and my only exposure to jazz was my mom occasionally would put on uh, a Dexter Gordon album. I
Yeah.
think it was Armin in Paris.
Oh,
And she also had the John Coltrane Ballads album, and
oh,
she would
nice.
put those on occasionally. But that was my only exposure to it.
Interesting.
I never found it to be that interesting. At least when we would listen to it with her, I wanted to listen to other stuff.
Yeah. You didn't say, "Oh wow, that's cool. I want to do that." No.
And so my teacher was just like, "Hey, they need some more trombone players. Do you think you might want to do it?" So I said, "Sure, why not? Like,
Yeah.
this could be fun." Um, and I had no idea what I was doing, but at that point, I was just pretty strong on the instrument. I was good at playing the trombone. Um, and I got to that camp, and they put me in the top group, basically in the top student position. They had one of the counselors in the very, very top spot. And I was an
Oh,
eighth grader, amongst all, like, mostly high schoolers. Um, and I really had no idea what I was doing. but I think if I thought, hey, maybe like, you know, my ability on the instrument and just I was lucky that my teacher always really emphasized listening to a lot of music and really trying to emulate what I was hearing, which is something that's, you know, really standard kind of in the jazz tradition as far as like how jazz is taught. We really try to emphasize a lot of listening.
Yeah.
Um, I feel lucky that my classical teacher was also into that, because it made it pretty easy for me to try to fit in at least. Like I would hear people play something, I would just try to copy it. And I feel really lucky at that point then that on faculty at that camp was this great trombonist, Scott Whitfield. And he's based in LA, and he had lived in New York for a number of years, and is really just an amazing improviser and also an amazing lead trombone player in a big band. So I got to really hear him just the entire week. The way that camp worked was
Wow.
you'd go all day, take classes, you'd play in a big band, you do instrument specific stuff, maybe some theory classes, and then at the
Right.
end of the night, the faculty, I think almost every night, the faculty would all get together in their own faculty band and
Wow.
play a show. So it was pretty
Oh,
cool just to hear all that stuff live, and that was kind of my first introduction to it. And from then on, I just kind of fell in love with it and decided, you know, I still continue to play classical trombone,
I was
but
going to ask if you do any. Yeah. Yeah.
I really started to investigate it. So JJ was actually one of the first people that I ever started checking out. And I
Okay.
think it must have been at Scott's suggestion to check out JJ. I mean,
Okay.
JJ is probably, you know, uh, known as the pioneer of jazz trombone. And if there's
Oh,
one
wow.
trombone player that most people know, it's probably JJ, at least in
Yeah.
the jazz realm. So I started definitely with him. I checked out a lot of his albums.
Yeah.
He had a partnership with Kai Winding, who was another trombone
Okay. Winning. I
player.
remember that name. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Sure. Yeah.
they
Yeah.
had a
Yeah.
two trombone project where they would play together. So I thought that was really cool.
Wow.
Hearing all those arrangements of them playing two trombones, and then they had another project where they had six other trombone players for a trombone octet with rhythm
Wow.
section. That was also something that, you know, at that point, I mean, obviously I loved the sound of the trombone and I loved playing the trombone, but it was really cool to hear it in that sort of situation, like eight trombone players, and they're really capturing the full spectrum of the kinds of sounds you get out of the instrument.
Are there different types of trombones, different saxes, or is one size fits all?
There are, yeah. So like saxophones, you know, you kind of start soprano and
Yeah.
alto and
Okay. Oh,
tenor
there are. Okay.
and bari, but the on trombone it's a little more rare, I guess. I mean, there
Yeah.
are soprano and alto trombones. People don't really play them that often. Alto trombone is mostly for some orchestral repertoire.
Okay.
The trombone that most people will see just like played regularly is the tenor trombone, and that's what people normally just call trombone. Um, and then there's also bass trombone, which is
Hmm.
pretty common also in the orchestra, and then in big bands as well. Those lowest parts are played on bass trombone.
Is it a bigger instrument? Is it physically larger?
It is
Or?
bigger, yeah, and
Yeah.
there's more tubing, and it has a couple extra valves. I don't actually own a bass trombone right now, but
Yeah.
um, yeah, so it's a little bit bigger, and it has the ability with the extra tubing and some couple valves to reach some lower notes. And then you could go even lower. I mean, there's contrabass trombone too, but that's more, you know, you hear that more on film scores for
Okay.
really like, you know,
Pretty
but
specialized repertoire, huh?
anytime you're gonna hear a trombone player, especially, you know, in a solo setting and in a jazz setting, and most soloists in the classical rap, it's tenor trombone and then occasionally bass trombone. But yeah,
What's
there are a
the
lot of different types.
what's the? I know you've received a lot of accolades in your career already, and you're remind me of the name of the manufacturer that you're affiliated with.
It's BAC.
BIC. So, and they're one of the great manufacturers, I gather, and based in the
Yeah,
U.S.
yeah. Interestingly enough, they're a pretty relatively young company. I started playing BAC in 2011, and at that point, they were pretty new. to making instruments.
Uh-huh.
It's basically run by a team led by this guy Mike Corrigan, and he's in Kansas, and he made his name really as an instrument repairman.
Oh,
So,
I was going to say, how do you suddenly get into the instrument
so
manufacturing?
he was really known for a long time as one of the top, especially brass repairmen in the U.S. And at some point, he just started making custom parts for people, and that led to him ultimately starting to make custom instruments for people. And now they've kind of blown up quite a bit in the last 10 years or so. When I started playing with them, he was pretty new to it, and he was partnering with this trombone player in New York named Elliot Mason, who plays with the Jazz Lincoln Center Orchestra with Wynton Marsalis. And at that time, I was taking private lessons with Elliot, just kind of on my own, not even through school. And so I kind of got in with BAC early on, basically just from hanging around Elliot a lot. And so they would always be sending him instruments to try out, sending him new things to try out. And so he would always have new stuff at his place every time I would go over there for a lesson.
Oh, nice.
And I kind of just ended up on one of their horns by chance. Basically, it was they made it for someone else, and that person didn't really like it, and they sent it back. So they sent it to Elliot, and they're like, "Hey, try it out, or see if any of your students like it." And I did, and that's what I've been playing on ever since. So that was my sophomore year of college, I think.
Oh, fantastic.
And I've stuck with them since then.
Now you're an affiliated artist, I guess, right? And that hopefully comes along with some benefits. Yeah. Wonderful. So talk a little bit, and this can get a little esoteric, as I told you before we went on, I'm not a musician, so bear with me. I'm sure we have musicians listening. If you want to talk about jazz in general, I know it's a very diverse genre, the little bit I know, and all the different, concerts I went to and the music I've listened to from, Miles Davis at the Hollywood Bowl and Monk and everybody else. And, since now and then, what about jazz? Where do you fit in? And I know you've done a variety of things, from some of the electronic stuff I've listened to your new album. Just talk about some of the different jazz genres.
Yeah, so it's such a wide-ranging umbrella term, really.
Yeah.
And I think one thing that ties it all together is that it's pretty much, for the most part, improvised music that is coming from the Black American musical tradition. And I think that's like no matter what direction the music ends up going, that's kind of how you can tie it all together and think of it as jazz. So, I don't really know if I have a place that I consider myself to, I guess a lot of my original music is somewhere in the intersection of jazz and rock. My band that I recorded my album with is in some ways influenced by just kind of rock band format, where I have two guitars and they kind of, one takes lead sometimes and the other takes more of a rhythm role, or they kind of switch around. But it's a septet, and it basically is me and
I was going to ask you septet, how many pieces?
It's pretty similar to the band that I'm going to be bringing to the concert at the end of the month. Coming up, but just with an extra guitar. So
this is the album called More Than Anything from just a couple of years ago, right?
Yep. And I had put it out. We released it literally the week before all the COVID shutdowns. So this year, 2022 is actually the first time we're getting to really play all that stuff live now that the album has been out. I mean, I had been playing that music a little bit leading up to the recording of the album, but that was years ago, because we recorded it at the end of 2018. And I even sat on those recordings for a while before we decided to release them.
Is it too late to call your concert a CD release party?
Oh, no, it's never too late. It's never too late.
Be sure to bring some to sell.
And I'll have plenty. I'll have plenty of copies there.
Great.
Yeah.
So are some of or all of the musicians you're bringing? Are they were they on the album?
Actually, on this show, none of them were.
Oh, none of them. Okay.
Yeah, kind of interestingly enough, we'll be playing probably some of the music from the album, but
Yeah.
not exclusively. I think uh, we'll probably be playing some of it, and then we might, call some tunes and play some jazz standards and maybe some other
Okay.
things that I've written.
Yeah.
It, yeah, so I don't know. I don't really feel like I have anywhere that I really fit in. I mean, if my music were to be classified in some way, it's generally some sort of mix of jazz and rock, but I feel comfortable in all sorts of settings. I mean, from earlier swing stuff to playing in bebop style, kind of all the way up to what I do right now. And
Yeah.
a lot of the work that I get, it's wide ranging. At least in
Okay. Yeah,
LA.
you've
Yeah.
played in bands backing up. I remember reading, Michael Bublé and other
Mhm.
folks that you've supported. So you've got to have those chops to cover all those bases, right?
Yeah, and I think one thing that's interesting about the career is, at least my career as a jazz musician, is that is just, I try to just be as well versed in as many different things as I can.
Yeah.
Obviously, you can't. There's so much music out there; it's not possible to be a
Sure.
master of
Right.
everything.
Right.
But um, I feel like I feel confident at least, and I know most of my friends who also make a living doing this, feel confident playing in a number of kind of. We have that, I guess, like we're informed by the tradition of the music, and we've spent a lot of time immersing ourselves in it and studying it,
Sure.
and so it's something that we're able to step into if we need to. Like the Buble stuff, for instance, it's a bit like the sessions I'm on at least are full big band, and
Uh,
it's more coming out of like a lot of times stuff more similar to like Frank Sinatra recordings and that kind of thing.
that's what I kind of figured. Yeah.
So, the arranging style is either like kind of the more like Count Basie
Yeah.
or Nelson Riddle, who did a lot of those recordings, arrangements for Frank Sinatra. So that kind of stuff.
And then
That's
later worked with Linda
playing.
Ronstadt. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a certain way of playing.
Yeah.
And even within a big band, it's a certain way of playing. And just knowing how to phrase things, playing within the trombone section and within the band. So I pride myself, at least personally, on my versatility. But I would say that on the flip side of that, I've made a pretty deliberate effort, in Los Angeles especially, to make myself known as someone who is open to playing new original music. So I feel pretty lucky that most of my performing career is in that field. I get a lot of work as a sideman for other people's music that's original music, and a lot of
Oh,
times
wow.
more challenging and more not necessarily more challenging than the other stuff, but it is challenging, and a lot of times, not really as obviously connected to some of the more old school stuff that I also spent a lot of time playing.
Sure. Well, you can cover the bases, and obviously you're in demand, and in LA, you're in the right kind of market. And growing up there, I know I got to go to a lot of concerts. In fact, you're talking about big band. I was just thinking about, have you heard any Toshiko Akiyoshi?
Oh, totally.
Right. I mean, that was some really great stuff. And like I said, Disneyland used to have those big band nights, and I heard Basie perform live a couple of times, and just really, really good stuff. So, but but you got to keep it moving forward, right? That was then, and this is now, and it's great that you can be involved with that new music as well. So what, John? What do you say to folks who say they don't like jazz? I'm sure you've heard that.
I've heard that a lot.
I certainly have, and what do you say?
Um, Again, jazz is so wide ranging
Right.
that I don't think it's really possible to just make that sort of statement with I think most people who make that sort of statement probably haven't spent a lot of time investigating it, and that's okay. I mean, there's plenty of other music out there, but I do feel like that most people can find some sort of introduction and some sort of parallel in to music that they enjoy, and that was kind of my way into it. Honestly, was again like I mentioned earlier, when I was growing up, my mom occasionally would put on albums, and I didn't particularly find them that interesting. And I was like, oh, this person sounds good, but I don't really know what's going
Yeah.
on. And for me, my kind of like gateway into playing jazz, into investigating jazz beyond the camp that I mentioned, was just the fact that growing up I really loved, especially once I started playing trombone, I really loved bands like Earth, Wind and Fire.
Sure. Oh yeah, when they bring in the brass, oh, man.
Yeah, and so like really like the horn driven stuff, and so
Yeah.
I started getting pretty into just checking out what the history of those bands, especially Earth, Wind and Fire. I would go in and
Huge.
look at all their recordings and see who was playing on them, and see what those musicians were doing. And I realized that at least in that band, and it actually applies to Chicago too. Those were the kind of the two bands that were big for me when I was growing up.
I'm getting chills because I'm remembering a concert I went to in New Orleans, Earth, Wind and Fire and Chicago.
Yeah, they toured together
On
for
the
a number
same
of years.
bill. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. My son was with me at the time. I was at a trade show. I was working and he came along with me to help, and they happened to be playing in town at the whatever the football stadium's called. It was like phenomenal.
Yeah. So I guess like my parents love those bands, and so we listened to a lot of that stuff when I was growing up. And me just investigating that, I realized that almost all those musicians initially were jazz musicians. I mean, especially
Oh,
Earth, Wind and Fire really
really?
started as like kind of a more free improvisational group, which is kind of crazy to think about. Like when most people know their hits, which are really catchy and like
Yeah.
very clearly in the pop world, but there's a lot of harmonic complexity to the music of both those bands that they're able to present in a really accessible way. And yeah, so I found out, wow, all these guys were jazz musicians. Like
Interesting. I didn't realize that.
I should check that out. I mean, and see what's going on, because like if I want to be able to do that kind of thing,
Yeah.
because when I was growing up, especially, it was like, wow, like I mean, it's kind of still, somewhere in there, like sort of a dream gig for me that like I would love to get to play with them. I mean,
Huh.
they have their horn sections that they kind of always work with, so it's not really like, those people are just as part of the band as anything else. So it's
Sure.
not. But if I, that's always been one of those kind of like dream gigs, is like, playing in Earth, Wind and Fire or something like that. So I figured like if I want to do something like that, then I have to
Yeah.
figure out how they got to that point. And I realized that most of them were jazz musicians, and so
Well, that, like you said, that rock jazz fusion thing, and like there it is.
and if you listen to their older recordings, especially Earth, Wind and Fire, you can really hear a lot more of that relationship coming out of a lot of I mean, a lot of those guys are from Chicago, and there's a huge just kind of
Oh,
improvised music scene of like black music coming out of Chicago, especially at that time, like the 60s, 70s.
sure.
And most of those guys came out of that scene. And so for me, it was just like that was kind of the entry point. And so to get back to your original question, just about people don't like jazz, I think there's generally something for everyone that could be found. Whether you like rock more, or whether you listen to a lot of electronic music, there's always people, especially these days. I
Yeah.
mean, most jazz musicians of my generation, at least, like for better or for worse, like we didn't get to grow up hearing a lot of the legends of the music live, right? Like that, to the point where like they're playing all the time. I mean, most of
Yeah.
us, we've only been able to check out recordings, but a lot of the music that we grew up with was other kinds of music. So that inevitably is going to come out in the music that we create, even as
Sure.
jazz musicians. And I found that, like, it just everyone's tastes are different, but I also think that there is probably something to be found for everyone, whatever kind of music you're into, that has some connection to jazz, and that can lead to other things, and that can lead to other things.
No,
So,
I totally agree, and that's a great answer. And for me, it's people just need to be a little bit curious. If you like, assuming you like music, most people do, in
mhm.
one form or another, and just yeah, that's what we're trying to do with our theaters and the programs we present. We don't want to present the same thing you can see anywhere else in town every night of the week, and that's great for what that is, and that's got a huge following. The basic pop music groups and what have you that perform locally. We want to bring in groups like you and stretch the audience a little bit if they'll just be a little bit curious and dig into it. Hey, I kind of like that, but what else is in that genre? Take the time to explore and experience different art forms, not just music but art in general. So yeah,
Definitely.
we're speaking the same language. We kind of touched on the classical trombone issues, and what about this is kind of fun when I was reading up before this conversation. Are there any great female trombone players? I could only come up with one.
There's a couple who, you know, I, obviously the representation of women in the jazz scene I mean, it's a whole conversation
Yeah,
unto itself.
I'm sure.
Some of my favorite trombone players that I know, at least, historically, Melba Liston is
Oh,
probably one of the most prominent.
okay.
And she was really known as both a great trombone player, but also a great arranger. And a lot of times, she wasn't really featured too often. But if you go back, and I'm blanking on bands
It's all right.
specifically,
It's not a
but
quiz. I just was curious. Good to
there's
know that you know
there's
one.
a ton
Yeah.
of videos that you can just, like, of big bands from the 50s, 60s, and stuff, and she's
That
just like
long ago. Really?
in the band.
Okay.
And an amazing player too, and really an amazing arranger as well. So that's kind of it goes, that's the first who I can think of who was really,
Okay.
like, kind of a prominent fixture in the scene. Some of my favorite these days, one of my friends who I kind of grew up playing with, she's from San Francisco. Her name's Natalie Cressman, and she's in the really more in these days kind of heavily in the Brazilian music scene.
Wow.
Um, and we grew up playing together out here in California, but then we both ended up going to Manhattan School of Music. So I've played with
Oh,
her
right.
quite a bit. She also plays in Trey Anastasio's band. He was in the band Fish.
Oh, okay.
And so she's kind of both in sort of in the pop horn section world, and then also a lot of her music is kind of coming from more Brazilian music. She's really kind of gotten deep into Brazilian music. She's really one of my favorites around
Wow.
right now. Um,
Yeah, wonderful.
and yeah, there's definitely like not, it's pretty lopsided though.
Yeah.
And one thing that I find to be, at least in the professional world, and that that comes with its own set of just kind of like culture issues and that sort of thing that could be a huge other conversation. But one thing that I do find to be encouraging is that, at least as an educator, I'm seeing a lot more, like, at the lower levels, at middle school and high school, and even college now, just like girls and women who are interested in playing the trombone who are actually pursuing it. So
Great.
I think is pretty cool. And that gives me a lot of optimism for the future, that representation will sort of you know even out a little bit
Yeah.
as we go forward.
No, that's great. Good to know they're out there. Again, I had a tough time coming up with anybody except I don't know if you've seen Gunhild Carling, that
Right,
female
right.
who plays with Scott Bradley and Postmodern Jukebox, and she has got a great little TED talk. In fact, talking about her trombone playing. But yeah, it's fun. Let's see. We touched on the album. Just talk about, just if you would, real quick, the whole process of putting together an album. How does that happen? I mean, I've never asked
Um,
anybody that question. You suddenly say, "I got enough work here. I want to make an album," or what do you do?
so for me, I had been in LA for a while, and I would put my own shows together every once in a while, but it got to the point where I had sort of a regular band that was, and we kind of had, some music that we were kind of really developing together. Um, and I guess over the course of 2017 and 2018, I was really trying to book a lot of shows with this group. And initially, it was just a sextet, similar in instrumentation to the band that I'll have on the 30th. But at some point, my pianist couldn't make a show, and I couldn't think of anyone else that I wanted to play piano. The people who I had normally called, they all weren't available. So I decided just to call another guitar player, and we ended up doing a show with two guitars instead of guitar and piano, and it was really fun.
Mm.
So I just started doing that occasionally, and then I started adding piano back into it, and it got to the point where we were able to create a really unique sound, or at least I think, with the sound of just like all three of them at the same time, able to get a lot of different combinations of textures and sounds happening.
Yes.
So I just a little bit of background. I had done this graduate fellowship program through the Thelonious Monk Institute, and this was is basically housed at UCLA. And this was something that I did. Technically, it's a master's degree program, but I had done it after I'd already received a master's degree. Kind of just as like just an opportunity to
Sure.
further develop my craft and enrich my career. I mean, it's a really interesting program where they audition really selectively and end up only taking one band every 2 years.
Wow.
And the instrumentation isn't really set. I mean, they'll have a rhythm section like piano, bass, and drums, but beyond that, it's kind of like the front line could be anything.
Yep.
So my class was 7 people, and it was me, and alto player, tenor player, and then piano, bass, drums, and a vibraphonist.
Mm.
And you basically are there for 2 years straight, and you
Really?
just kind of are only playing together, and you rehearse every day. And
After your master's, you'd already done your master's.
Mhm.
Wow.
Yeah, and the cool thing is that the institute itself, it's actually been renamed since to the Herbie Hancock Institute, but Herbie has been kind of the leading force in that institute ever. I mean, even when it was named the Monk Institute, kind of in honor of Thelonious Monk.
Sure.
So we occasionally would get to work with Herbie. Wayne Shorter is also really involved there. We would get to work with him, and they would bring in guest artists, anytime they would bring in a guest artist, it would generally be for a week at a time. So we get to work with someone, really closely for a week.
Nice.
It was a really awesome experience. And another perk of it was that UCLA has like a pretty new recording studio that's really, really, really nice. And at least at that point, I don't know if this is still the case, but at least at that point, is if you were student in the music school at all, you basically had the ability to book studio time for free. They would give everyone basically one project's worth of whatever, and that could be anything. So for me, it was 2 days in the studio recording and then 2 days of mixing, completely free. So I figured, hey, I have this band that I've been playing with a lot. Let's just get in the studio and record everything that we've been playing. And my idea wasn't even initially to record an album. It was just like let's just document this stuff.
Yeah.
And if it becomes an album, that's great. And if it doesn't, like I didn't have to pay for it, so it's fine. Like, all I had to do was pay my guys for their time.
Sounds like a gift.
So we ended up getting in the studio and we didn't even rehearse for it. I mean, I had a couple people coming in from out of town. A couple of the people in the band were at that point based in the Bay Area, and they can only come in like right for the session. So we just got in and we're just like, well, we're not rehearsing, like whatever, we'll play. And actually, my pianist at last minute couldn't make it, so I was bringing in a different pianist, someone who I'd played with a lot, who had never played the music. And So I was just like, no pressure.
Great.
We'll just have fun. But
Yeah.
it turned out
Oh wow.
really really great. I
No,
mean,
no, it's a
we
fantastic album.
I was really happy with it. I felt it really captured the sound of the band. This pianist who
Oh,
stepped in, his name is Jacob Mann. He basically came in and sounded like he'd been playing it forever, even though he had never played a lot of the music.
oh my God.
And it's really 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 fun to be able to do that. And then again, like I at that point didn't have a lot of money because I was just out of school, so I was just sitting
Yeah.
on it for a while, pretty much over a year, until I was able to save up, to get it mastered and get CDs made. And I ended up luckily being able to partner with a label in LA called Orenda Records,
All right. I saw that. Yeah.
which is run by this great trumpet player Dan Rosenboom, and it's really just like almost like a one-man project. He does everything, and it's not really like a major label type of thing, but I saw, that most people who are doing not well, a lot of the creative music that's happening in LA, creative original music, they're putting it out with him.
Oh
So
wow.
I figured at the very least it would be good to be associated with that and to have, if people know that his label is putting out that kind of stuff, that's a good association with my music that I'd
Oh,
like to
good.
have.
Good call on your part. Wow, what a fascinating story and putting that together. However you find your music, go find Jon Hatamiya more than anything, and you can come to the concert on July 30th and buy a copy there. I'm sure you'll be available to sign
Yeah,
it.
I'll have CDs there, and I'll
Yeah,
also have links to everything that you can find online.
wonderful. Well, gosh, we're almost at the top of the hour here, John.
Mhm.
What else? What haven't we talked about that we should touch on? Anything else you want to add as far as your career wish list, or where do you go from here?
Well, that's a good question. I never know. I mean, right
Yeah.
right now I'm spending most of my time teaching. I just joined faculty at USC, which is where I got my master's.
That's pretty huge, right? Thornton School of Music, and
Yeah, it's been great to be involved again. I've been
is
teaching.
that the? I'm sorry to interrupt, but is that the school? I mean, that is the music school for whether it's jazz or opera or whatever. It's
Yeah,
the whole umbrella entity.
Thornton
Yeah,
School.
I thought
Yeah,
huge music school. So
yeah.
congratulations, John.
Thank you. Yeah, and I've been teaching at Sac State for the last couple of years too, just teaching their trombone students, and then also at Cosumnes River College, actually teaching classical trombone there. Weirdly
Ah,
enough, which is kind of fun because I haven't really spent a lot of time on that in a long time. But beyond that, I'm also spent a lot of time writing and arranging for people. Um, I have a long-running partnership with the Fernando Pullum Center in LA. He's got like a great after-school educational program for
hmm.
kids in the Lamert Park, Crenshaw area. And
Oh, great, sure.
I do a lot of writing with for his student bands. That's led to some pretty cool opportunities. He's really well connected in the pop world and gets amazing opportunities for his kids. I mean, they're doing performances where like his student big band, they'll play with Michael McDonald or with John Mayer
Oh
or
my gosh.
with Jackson Brown. It's been pretty cool, and he's been having me basically arrange all the stuff that they do with those artists. That's been fun.
And what age group is that? High school or?
Yeah, anywhere from middle school up to like early college. Like
Gee,
some of his kids are in community college, and some of them are a lot younger. So
well,
that's been pretty fun.
yeah.
And then just playing too. I mean, my main performing gig right now is playing with this guy Lewis Cole, who's a drummer and uh, singer and songwriter, and he's really interesting. Got a really quirky, unique style. In very strange stage persona, but it's a lot of fun.
Wait, well, I'm gonna write that down. What's his name?
Lewis Cole. Yeah, and he's an amazing drummer, amazing songwriter, and
Okay.
his latest group for the last few years has been kind of a large group with six horns. Um,
Oh,
and so that's been fun. We just did a little short tour in Canada like a month ago, and then we're doing some West Coast shows in October
yeah.
too. But I've been in his touring group for I guess since 2018 or so. So that's been cool. And then
Great.
I have this show coming up with you guys. So
Yeah.
I'm really
We're,
excited about that.
we're super excited to kind of bring you home to well, at least you're in Northern California in Sacramento, but a little farther north for your family heritage way back when. So, all right. Well, we managed to use up the better part of an hour, John. So, thank you so much, Jon Hatamiya, for being on with us today. Stay safe, be well. Tickets are available for the Jon Hatamiya Sextet concert at the Sutter Theater Center for the Arts on July 30th at
Yeah, and if I can,
YubaSutterArts.org.
if it's okay, I'd like to just give a shout
Please.
out to the people who are going to be playing with me.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sorry. We should have mentioned that.
Come on,
Please.
it's totally cool, but it'll be a really fantastic band. I feel really lucky that the legendary Sacramento-based pianist Joe Gilman, he played in Bobby Hutcherson's band for a number of years, and he's really one of the I would say just the all-time greats that has come out of the Sacramento area, and he's still based in Sacramento. He'll be playing piano on the show. It's the first time that I've played with him a number of times just casually, but it's the first time we're playing a gig together, so I'm really excited he's available for that.
Is he
I got
okay with a 9-foot concert grand, or does he
I'm
need
sure, yeah, I'm sure it'll be great.
that?
I can't
Okay.
wait to hear him on it. Uh, I've got a couple of friends coming out from Los Angeles. Devin Daniels, who's a great alto saxophonist. He's actually currently in that Herbie Hancock Institute program. And
Mm,
Luca Alamano, who's the bass player, he's from Italy. He was in my class at the institute, so we know each other really well. We've played each other's
mm,
music a lot. And then two other of my favorite local musicians, Arlen Anderson, great guitarist in Sacramento, who I go back years and years with playing with. He's one of the first professionals that I ever played with, actually, and anytime I do a show up here, I've got to have him on it. And Michael Quaig is going to be playing drums, who was based in the Central Valley for a long time, and then now is one of the I would say one of the first call drummers around the Bay Area, based in
mm.
Oakland right now. So it's going to be a really fantastic band with people kind of from all around California that I just love playing with. This particular band configuration has never played together, so that'll be the first time. But
Okay.
I have a feeling it's going to be really, really fun.
Wow. Great lineup. Thank you, John. All right. Jon Hatamiya Sextet. July 30th, Sutter Theater Center for the Arts. Tickets at YubaSutterArts.org. Doors open at 6. Show starts at 7. If you haven't been in the new and improved Sutter Theater, come on out. Great excuse to see the beautiful lobby, full bar, art gallery, and then, of course, our beautiful Clark family black box theater. So get those tickets. Tables are available, and all that information is on our website. As always, thanks to our technical support team, our producer, Abby Cecina, technical director, Shante Arroyo. You can always go to YubaSutterArts.org for updates on all our programs. But until next month, that's it for this edition of Artist Alchemy. Thanks for watching.